Prohibition went, what we have right now is a carbon copy. Drug kingpins have replaced mob bosses, and drug dens have replaced speakeasies. When was the last time you heard of a liquor store owner going up and down the halls of a high school trying to push gin on high school students? Or when's the last time you heard of a vodka addict breaking into houses in order to support a vodka habit? Or when's the last time you heard of two liquor store owners having a shootout over who gets the best corner? What we have now is not a drug problem. What we have is a prohibition problem. There should be no law to prevent you from owning an object, whether it's a gun to protect yourself or drugs for whatever reason you wish. If there is no victim, there is no crime. As your president, I will federally decriminalize all drugs and encourage states to treat drug use as a health issue, not a criminal issue. We should allow the medical community to deal with substance abuse in a way that salvages lives instead of throwing them away. Accordingly, I will pardon anyone convicted at the federal level of any victimless crime. These are just a few steps towards ending the over-incarceration of people of color and letting consensual adult activities become safer and destigmatized. In addition to the overcrowding in our federal prisons, the war on drugs has negatively affected our communities and the interactions that many people have with police. The drug war has single-handedly created gangs that police themselves, often through violence. Consequently, the federal government has created a police state, including the Drug Enforcement Agency, which receives $3 billion of our tax dollars every year. They have repeatedly raided medical marijuana clinics in states where medical marijuana is perfectly legal. And long gone is the friendly local police officer who walks the beat and knows everyone by name. What we've done is we've replaced the old community and to serve and protect that we see on the sides of the cop cars with nameless, faceless SWAT teams, where our police are trained to be like military, where instead of a together community feeling, we've got an us versus them. I don't want America to be at war with other countries, and I certainly don't want America to be at war with its own citizens. As your president, I will defund federal involvement in policing, including the DEA and DHS. That means ending the supplying of military equipment like tanks and tear gas to over 8,000 federal, state, and local police forces. I will end no-knock raids, which too often end up killing innocent bystanders like Breonna Taylor. And as Libertarian Congressman Justin Amash has brought up, when police do misbehave, it is nearly impossible to take legal action because of an arcane doctrine known as qualified immunity, which states that victims can only successfully sue an officer when a clear rights violation has already been established in a prior case. When I am your president, I will end qualified immunity so that police are held to the same standard as everyone else. While millions of Americans have suffered from government's war on drugs, almost every American has suffered from the COVID-19 pandemic in some way. South Korea confirmed its first case within a day of our first case and quickly jumped ahead in testing, containing the spread. As infections in the U.S. skyrocketed, South Korea nearly eradicated COVID-19, and they did so without any lockdowns. A testing initiative started by Bill Gates was the very first to roll out testing that could be done in the U.S. outside of a hospital system. And they processed 20,000 tests. But on May 12th, the FDA stopped them from further testing and said they needed, quote unquote, further assessment. This is just one example of how the FDA has worsened the COVID-19 crisis and made it extremely difficult for anyone to get tested. Currently, only those companies with enough money and resources can even get FDA approval. And once they do, they weaponize their patents to hold a monopoly. It costs $1 billion to bring a drug to market, and thanks to the FDA, it's about a 10-year process. Meanwhile, patients are desperately waiting for drugs that could possibly save their lives. New medicines and procedures should get to patients as quickly and safely as possible. When I am your president, I will get rid of the efficacy requirement of the FDA, if not the FDA entirely. The FDA is not the only issue with the American healthcare system. Let's be honest, it's not working for anyone, and my heart breaks for the millions of Americans who've left behind. Those American families who've been bankrupted by the healthcare system. For decades, politicians in Washington have been blaming it on our free market system, saying we need to have a single payer system. Well, I've got news for them. We haven't had anything close to a free market system in healthcare in nearly a century, and the alternative to our current big government failure isn't an even bigger government failure. When I hear politicians say we need Medicare for all, what I'm hearing them say is we need VA hospital for all. That top-down monopoly is unacceptable for any person, let alone those who are willing to sacrifice their lives for our country. We cannot wait for government to decide who lives and who dies. We must put control back into the hands of the patient. As I see it, the biggest problem we have with our healthcare system is that our insurance isn't insurance at all. In any other industry, insurance only comes about for unexpected costs. Therefore, costs are relatively low. Consider our car insurance. What if your car insurance paid for gas, oil, car washes? First of all, you would have no reason to shop around for the cheapest gas prices. In fact, you might even go to the nicest gas station because they give you free coffee while you wait, because what do you care? You take out your little $5 copay card and it costs the same as it would at a cheap gas station. Therefore, gas stations would have absolutely no reason to compete. They would simply pass along the cost to the insurance company, and you wouldn't even know that prices had gone up. And then the insurance companies would simply raise your premiums the next year. This is exactly what we've got going on in our healthcare system. Patients have no reason to shop around, and healthcare providers have no reason to come up and compete on prices. Insurance companies can charge higher prices without any accountability, and we're the ones left footing the bill after this spiraling. Now, two good examples of a somewhat free market system are in the country of Singapore and the state of Indiana. In Singapore, the costs per person are about 1/3 of what they are in our country. And in fact, a doctor visit only costs $10, which is less than our copay. And thanks to the system in the state of Indiana, they've been able to get generic drug use to go from 10% to 90%. But here's the good part. The patients were glad to do it because they got to keep the savings. And that's the way it should be. If you shop for groceries, a car, computer, whatever, if you can find a better price, you get to keep the savings. The VA healthcare system should be converted to a system like the one in the state of Indiana, where veterans would be given control over their own healthcare dollars. Let them decide where and when and how to use them. The government letdown of our soldiers does not begin with healthcare. It starts from the time they enlist. In fact, there are currently some deployed overseas who weren't even born yet. when the so-called War on Terror began. The United States spends more on military than the next 7 countries combined. We are in nearly 150 countries around the globe. And what do we have to show for it? In the last 20 years alone, over 500,000 people have died in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq, including 250,000 civilians. Those are parents and siblings and children who will never return home. In every election, politicians promise more peace, but they only deliver more war. If I'm elected president, my first official act will be to bring the troops home. I want to turn America into one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. Our military must be trained to defend our shores, but we have to stop meddling around the world and make peace with our world neighbors. The military budget, unfortunately, is far from the only example of how the government has misdirected our economy. The IRS taxes Americans at every turn, and the tax system is so complicated that only those who can afford personal accountants and tax lawyers can even navigate the code. And that same IRS that taxes us to death probes into every personal financial decision we make in our lives to determine how much we should pay. Meanwhile, the government itself accumulates more debt. Now, we've got some in Washington who are saying we need to increase the military, and others saying we need to increase domestic spending. So what's our bipartisan compromise? They simply increase all spending. As your president, my veto pen is going to need a lot of extra ink. Runaway spending is also made possible by the Federal Reserve. When the federal government isn't able to raise taxes, it simply prints more money. Without any backing, since the Fed was created over a century ago, the American dollar has lost 96% of its value. We should reduce regulations to allow cryptocurrency and any other form of currency to enter the market. As your president, I will first audit and then end the Federal Reserve. I will eliminate the IRS and work with Congress towards eliminating the federal income tax altogether. It's time to move money out of the government sector and back to the people who earned it. Politicians and bureaucrats don't know what you need. You do. When it comes to cutting spending, we cannot take any solutions off the table. I would encourage baseline budgeting. So instead of assuming an increase, we start at 0 every year and add only what's vital. It's time for the government to balance its checkbook in the same way American families do. Given the challenges we face as a country, it's easy to feel like the change I'm talking about just can't happen. But I believe it can because I believe in you. I believe in the individuals who make up our great country. I see America through my grandmother's eyes, a place where the rights of the individual are greater than the power of government, a place where liberty means minimum government and maximum freedom, a place where the American dream isn't a dream at all. It's real and it's right there in front of you because you made it happen. As I ask for your vote this November, it's not because I'm asking you to cast a vote for me. Instead, I think you should vote for you. You know best how to spend your money. You know best how to prioritize your family needs. You know best what's best for you. Thank you very much. And we're going to have some Q&A, which is my favorite part. So we have a volunteer up here. Isaiah, would you like to give them the rules?
Yes, so please line up if you'd like to ask Joey a question. Just make sure you guys keep it to one question. She's very busy.
Well, I'm not that busy standing on stage, but we are flying. We are going to Anaheim tonight, and then tomorrow we're going to have an event there, I think, right? And then Sacramento, so.
Dr. Jorgensen, 83,000 M1 Garand in Korea, sitting in warehouses, currently still under an assault weapons ban, importation back to the civilian marksmanship program. Your response?
And they are where?
Korea.
Korea. I hadn't heard of that. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I would do anything I could to free anybody around the world. And let me say, I would get rid of every gun law that's been passed in the last 100 years, and I would do everything I could to keep the egregious red flag laws from being passed. By the way, I am a gun owner, but it doesn't matter because I'm a libertarian, and all libertarians believe that we have the right. Hi.
Can you sign my photo?
Of course. Come on, if somebody could lead you up the steps, and then we can take the next question.
What do you think about removing political science from colleges?
Removing political science colleges?
What would you think about removing political science being taught in colleges?
Oh, I guess that's a step in the right direction, huh? You know, when people... You know, when people ask me, when did you become... Oh, should we stand next to each other here? When people ask me, when did I become interested in politics, I tell them I'm still not interested in politics. I view voting libertarian as an act of self-defense. And usually another question is, so I guess you were what, senior class president or on student council? And I say, you know, I read Animal Farm in grade school, and when I got to high school and I saw the student council, I thought, well, here we go, the elite, you know, making rules for everybody else. I always hated that. I just figured somebody had to step up and do something, so no, I'm still not. I've never taken a political science class, and I would not be here if our country weren't, you know, again, my grandparents, I've got 3 of my grandparents are immigrants. If I didn't know what America was supposed to look like through them, I don't think I'd be here today. So thanks for that. Okay, I can take the next question.
With all of the violence occurring in the United States right now, what would you do as president to put a swift and peaceful end to the riots going on in cities like Portland, Seattle, etc.?
Well, I'd like to first of all talk about the cause, two causes. There you go. So, first of all, you have to look at how we got there. We do have systemic racism in our judicial, in our police system. For instance, drugs that people of color tend to use have longer prison sentences than those that whites use. Even though whites and blacks use drugs at about the same rate, illegal drugs, about 6 times as many blacks are incarcerated. Also, we need to get rid of, like I said, the no-knock raids and all those. So I understand why they're upset. What breaks my heart is that these, you know, especially like Black Lives Matter, who, by the way, I realize some of them are rioting. I still think more of that's Antifa, but I'm with them on getting rid of these egregious laws. What breaks my heart is that they are going to the very people who cause those problems, the government. And the answer isn't bigger government like they want. The answer is less government. And so, first of all, we need to fix the laws, end the racist war on drugs. That would be a good first step. But the other thing is the supplying of, tanks to police departments. Crime is a local issue. It should be up to local police, mayor, voters, city council. Let them decide what they want. And, you know, if you take almost any city in America, put an answer on or put a question on the ballot, a referendum. Would you like higher taxes so our police department can buy a tank? And I guarantee you, most of the time, it's going to be, heck no. I'd rather spend that money going out to dinner or something else. But what we have is the federal government taking our money and then dangling free tanks in front of people. And of course, the police departments aren't going to turn it down because they're going to say, well, I don't want those taxpayers, I don't want the people in Alabama to get it because our taxpayers paid for it. And now we've got, again, military, or we've got policemen acting more like the military, which is just escalating the problem. So I would try to get back every tank I could and then start fresh and let towns handle their own. Thanks.
Hey, Dr. Joe. Thank you
Hey.
for taking my question. I just wanted to know your thoughts on a consumption tax or just any other means of collecting revenue other than it being stolen.
A consumption tax would be fine if it were zero. A fair tax would be fine if it were zero. I mean, no such thing as a fair tax. We got to get down to nothing. Thanks.
Hi, good evening. I wondered if you would address the issue of border security. I don't mind the concept of open borders, but there's a lot of dangerous things that cross borders, at least currently. So could you project what that would look like if you are an open border supporter?
Yeah, and I do want the borders to look like they did when my grandparents crossed over before the 1920s. And I would say that's up to the military to keep, the very dangerous out. Overall, more people, on average, most of the people coming here are, first of all, GDP goes up. Secondly, per capita, they commit fewer crimes than Americans born on foreign soil. But I have nothing against, for instance, military intelligence figuring out, if there's, we don't want Bin Laden crossing the borders, of course. So, however, our current borders didn't keep him from doing what he did. So, obviously, that's not the answer. Thanks.
Inflation is something that's really devastating my community in Tucson, with like an 8.2% increase in the cost of living.
Wow.
What's your stance on the Federal Reserve, and if you ended it, what would that look like?
Yeah, what I want free market money because, when we have monopoly money, I mean literally monopoly money because it is run by a monopolistic government, it's out of our hands. As I said, we've lost 96% of its value. Back in the olden days, we heard about people who couldn't pay for their doctor visits. They didn't have a lot of money, so they'd bring chickens, right, to give to their doctors. What I would say is if you're a company, if you're a retail store and you want to accept chickens as your form of currency and that's what your customers want to pay, then that's up to you. Anybody should be able to accept and trade on any currency they want, not the monopoly one done by the government. And I don't think the gold standard goes far enough. That would be a small step in the right direction, but without real competition, without the free market in money as well as everything else, then we're going to be stuck where we are. Thanks.
What would you do about our heavy involvement in NATO and the UN?
Get out. Even as a teacher, I can answer a question shortly if I tried. Hey.
I know the general libertarian position is to end the Fed, as you just said, but I feel a more pragmatic solution would be appointing someone like Alan Greenspan or a figure like that. So, do you have any current figures in mind who could fill a position like that on the current Federal Reserve?
Yeah, in fact, we put out a press release saying that we would put Ron Paul. We would ask Ron Paul to choose someone. He's already given a lifetime service, which has been great for our country. I really miss watching those votes on C-SPAN where it's like 423 to 1, and you always knew that one was him. So we would go to him for his recommendation, and whoever he picks, I'd go along with it. Thanks. Become the President of the United States, how are you going to cope with the fact that nobody on Congress is on our side? How am I going to handle the fact that nobody what? Nobody in Congress is on our side. You'll have no support on either side of the aisle. Well, my short answer on that is I'm a teacher and I know how to handle problem students. But seriously, the myth of Ronald Reagan has got to die. How he gave us smaller government, and wouldn't it be great to go back to the days of Reagan? He gave us bigger government year after year after year for 8 straight years, every year he was in office. And part of the problem was he just signed any budget that came his way, no matter how it was, even if it wasn't balanced, even if it was larger. And the people close to him said, well, what do you expect? Congress didn't give him a balanced budget. Well, I know how to grade F papers, and I would simply tell them, nope, this is an F, go back and do it again, until it's something that I could give an A to and sign. And if they, push back 20 times, I'll just send it back to them 20 times. Now, and then last, I would remind them that I was elected president, and by the way, if you like your cushy jobs and you want to be reelected, maybe you should follow my lead since I'm who your constituents voted for. So, thanks.
Hey, Dr. Jorgensen.
Hey.
How would you bring Congress term limits to the table and make it more of an issue in Washington, since these people have made a career out of sitting in their cushy jobs and not doing anything for us?
Yeah, well, let me mention, I'm really not out there making that as much of an issue either. Now, yes, I do come down on the side of term limits. However, to me, that's still a symptom and not getting at the root of the problem. That as long as there's power and money in Washington, that people are going to want to go after it. So the only way to truly fix the system is to make government smaller at every level, which is why we need libertarians to run at every level, state, local, and federal.
All right, thanks for coming. I had a quick question. What are your thoughts on Social Security? If it was up to me, I wish I could just invest it in private accounts instead, but I know older people are using it to live life right now because they put so much money into it. But I know when I retire, I'm not going to get it.
Right.
So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, the good news is you'll get exactly what you want. First of all, I would have an immediate opt-out. So anybody who wanted to opt out because they know they're not getting their money, opt out, get a private fund. Now, for the people, though, who are living on it, they had their money taken from them before they even got their paycheck, and it did not go into the lockbox as Al Gore, was asking for. It went to pay for things it shouldn't have paid in the federal government to keep it going. So I would sell those government assets, whether it's downtown office buildings, oil rights, mineral rights, and so forth, and with that money, give them a sum that they would have as a private retirement account rather than being under the whims of Congress. And Cato has something called the 6.2% solution, which is pretty good. Thanks.
Hello, I'm a little new to the platform here.
Okay, well, great. What do you need to know?
I just learned that you're a teacher, actually, and I wanted to know what your stance was on education in general, since Arizona, more than others, seem to struggle.
Yes. Well, first of all, I do teach at Clemson University, but I'm not a professor, so I can't call myself a professor. My technical title is senior lecturer, but nobody knows what that is, so I'm a teacher. It's kind of like I teach high school at the college level. But no, education, when we're talking K through 12, that's a local issue. It should be decided among parents, teachers, and students, and that the federal government needs to get out of it. That money is sent to Washington, and then they keep most of it, send a fraction back. How about we let the local schools keep their money and they decide what to do with it? And if it were up to me, I would get rid of the Department of Education on the first day of office, because that's a one-size-fits-all that just can't work for a country as big and diverse as ours is. The people in rural Appalachia, much different needs than New York City, much different than in Arizona. So it should be up to local people. And that's one of the big differences between me and my opponents, is that, we've got Trump out there telling schools, well, you should go back to, in person. Well, maybe that's a good idea for your school, but maybe other schools it's not. It depends on the population. It depends on a lot of things. And you can't just give orders from Washington. So I would not overstep my bounds as president, and I would say it's up to you to decide what you want to do. Stop sending me money, keep it, you decide how to spend it. And then maybe teachers wouldn't have to be buying Kleenex boxes and crayons with their own money.
Hello. Hi.
Hey.
How would you continue to
federal funding of the United States Space Force, and what's your thoughts on that?
The United States what?
Space Force.
Oh, I wouldn't. The private. First of all, if you're a taxpayer and you're barely scraping by, maybe that money, instead of putting to the Space Force, maybe to you it's more important to get your plumbing fixed or something like that. And other people who are really big into space, let them put their money into it. We've got SpaceX, we've got, the guy over in England. Let people do it. We're not funding, well, we kind of are, never mind. Yeah, no, get out of it.
Hi, Dr. Joe. Thank you for what you're doing. On the topic of civil liberties and data privacy, you mentioned South Korea earlier in response to the COVID response.
I mentioned what earlier?
You mentioned South Korea's response
yes,
to COVID, right? Certainly from the FDA angle, but there's concerns about their warrantless access to bank records, GPS data to support the contact tracing. Here in the U.S., Section 230 is coming under fire from both sides, and some of that is the DOJ wanting to essentially force a program of certification to our technology providers that would give them backdoor to potentially, do more warrantless data access. What are your thoughts on the Section 230 stuff?
Yeah, that's unreasonable search and seizure, and we've got a constitutional right to not have people take that from us. It doesn't matter if it's our private financial information or where we shop online or whatever. It's still our personal information, and we should be able to share it with whoever we want, but we shouldn't have other people basically spying on us. Thank you.
Considering our mutual defense treaties throughout Europe and the Pacific, does your bring the troops home policy extend to countries such as South Korea, Japan, and the Philippines, who rely on us to be there to counter terrorism and an imperialist China?
Absolutely. And it would extend to France and Germany, because we keep hearing how great France is, that they get 5-week vacations. Well, maybe if they had to pay for their own military and we stopped paying for it, maybe we get 5-week vacations, And you know what, even if we go in and do something that we think is good, there's still going to be somebody who has a problem with it. Like the big peace deal that Trump was touting, not everybody's happy with it. Somehow you're going to make an enemy somehow. And again, why have the taxpayers in, Wyoming pay for somebody else's defense? Now, if people want to personally donate to other countries, fine with me.
I understand that ending the drug war would definitely help our prison system. But what do you feel we can do with the prison system now without ending the drug war?
Well, if I were to end the drug war, then I would have some control over the prison system, at least at the federal level. And also, now I couldn't do anything at the state and local level because, again, no overreach, but I would, through the bully pulpit, go up there and encourage states to do the same. But I would like to mention, I think there's one big problem that we have with our prison system, and that's the for-profit prisons who get money by locking up more people. And this is what's so crazy, is that the libertarian answer to how much government we should have usually boils down to police, courts, and military. There's only 3 things that the government should do, and yet one of the things they're handing out to somebody else. Meanwhile, they're getting into other stuff they shouldn't be doing, like education. So I would have the government do what it's supposed to be with that. But again, I can't personally let out everybody at the state and local level, but I would sure encourage governors to. Thank you.
What would your health insurance platform look like, and what would happen to people that are currently on Medicare?
So what I would do, now the problem is, because of the government, prices are too bloated. We can't just say, okay, tomorrow, free market, everybody, because there's not even a system in place for it to be a free market. So the way I would get the ball rolling, what they do in the state of Indiana is, and by the way, the state of Indiana, the first year they rolled, and it was voluntary to switch over to this real, and you know, what a concept, real insurance being an option. So the first year they rolled it out, only a handful of people joined. By the second year, something like 75% of people joined, because I saw what a good system it was. But what they do is they pay for the real insurance, and then they put dollars in their pockets to go around and start, you know, the doctors competing, and like I said. So what I would do is I would do that for the VAs, or for, you know, for veterans instead of the VA hospital, and Medicare and Medicaid, because somehow you got to start the ball rolling. And rather than giving them prepaid health, I would actually give them dollars and let them get the ball rolling. And by the way, that also means it's not just this doctor versus that doctor, but it's this doctor versus maybe alternative medicine, you know, maybe acupuncture, maybe chiropractor, whatever kinds you want, and get some real competition going. Thanks.
So right now we have open borders between the 50 states of the Union, and you're free to travel anywhere you want in this country and live wherever you want. And we have like a free market for state governments competing over us to give us the best living conditions so that we would choose that government.
Right.
Do you support a global free market for governments in the sense of open borders and having it be as easy to cross the border between Arizona and Sonora as it is to cross the border between Arizona and Utah?
I think the answer is yes, if I understood. Here's the thing. I'm not going to get involved in other countries and tell other countries what they should do. However, I want to open up our borders, and also I would allow Americans both to visit any country they wanted, whether it's Cuba or wherever, and trade with any country that they wanted. Of course, as you've heard, when goods cross borders, troops don't have to. And the way we got into World War II was, well, some historians say it was the reason Japan bombed us was the high tariffs, and that, you know, now, since we buy so many Toyotas and Hondas from them, they're not going to bomb our country now. So I would like to have that kind of relationship with all the countries so that it doesn't lead to that.
Hi, just to keep it short, what would your alternatives be for something like the Green New Deal?
The free market. Free market. Yeah, let me give you two things here. First of all, I met with two wonderful women in Montana, a group called PERC, P-E-R-C. Has anybody heard of them? They're looking into free market ways to help the environment. And they gave the story of how there was a beautiful forest and a timber company was buying the rights to cut down the trees, and the local people said, you know what, we kind of like those trees. How about we bid on, you know, the rights to the forest so we can keep the trees? They were shocked when they won, when they outbid the timber company, and then they said, okay, now what do we do? How do we raise the money? And they were surprised, although by the way, I'm not, they were surprised that they were able to raise the money within 2 weeks, because there were plenty of people who said, yeah, I like the environment, I like the forest, I'll pay for that. But the Montana government enacted a law after that that would prevent that from ever happening again. So that now the timber companies automatically get to win. Because that's the way government works. The only way we get big corporations and that corporations rule our lives is through big government. And it's big government, even at the state level, that's giving special interests favors. And my other example would be the Gulf oil spill. And a lot of people looked at that. You know, we saw the commercials of people with the Dawn detergent, you know, scrubbing all the little baby ducks. And people were saying, well, see what happens with companies? They don't care about the environment. That's why we need government involved. But what they don't realize is that government had given them a liability cap so they wouldn't be held fully liable. Now, in a free market, they would have had to, well, first of all, in a free market, they could have chosen no insurance, in which they would have gone bankrupt, as well they should. But what they would have done to not go bankrupt is to go to an insurance company and say, will you insure our drilling? And the insurance company would either say, no, it's too risky, in which case the drilling wouldn't have happened, or the insurance company would have said, well, okay, but it's a little risky. Tell you what, we're going to come out, we're going to spot check every week, every month, whatever, because we don't want to pay out a claim. So you've got the profit motive trying to keep the environment pristine. Just like the profit motive is what those people used in Montana to keep their forests. And last, I'd like to point out, I was in a debate, third-party debate in March when one of the people on the debate stage was a socialist, and she, when her closing, she said, the U.S. government, Department of Defense, is the biggest polluter on this earth. And then she went on to talk about how bad corporations were for pollution in the environment. And I just wanted to go over there and ask her, did you hear what you just said? You know, if the U.S. government is the biggest polluter, why are you going to them for help? Usually you don't go to the people causing the problem for the help. So I say the federal government, even state governments, are the last people who would want to do anything to help the environment. In fact, when we did have that Gulf oil spill, the government just passed it on to the taxpayers. What do they care? It's no nose off, no skin off their nose. Whereas private company, they would lose money. I'm particularly interested in the environment, so I give longer answers for that.
Hi, Joe. It's an honor to meet you.
You too.
Yeah, this is actually the first rally I've been to.
Oh, awesome.
Only one worth going to.
Thank you.
So, my question was, what are your thoughts on secular government?
On what?
Secular government.
Secular government. We need government so small that it just doesn't matter if it's secular or not. Police, courts, and military.
Hey, police, courts, military.
What I meant was more along the lines of, laws and bills being pushed that have religious motivations that are restrictive against people like the, gays and, different groups.
Yeah, but again, I want government so small that they're not even passing those kinds of laws. And let me give you an example of why I think the free market can do a much better job. First of all, you said LGBTQ community, we said gays, but we're talking, the gay community. And look at other people who have been oppressed or minorities. That was a government-run, government-owned bus that Rosa Parks was asked to sit on the back of. And 60% of the ridership at the time were blacks. And if Uber did that to the best 60% of their customers, they'd go out of business, as well they should. The Walt Disney Company in the early 90s started handing out benefits to partners of their gay employees because they wanted the best employees they could get. And people tend to treat their employees and customers well if they want to do better in the marketplace. Meanwhile, we've got Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama as recently as 2012 saying gay marriage should be illegal. So I don't want government to come anywhere near those laws. Who you get married to, that should be your decision, not the government's.
This will be the last question.
Do you want me to sign your picture? Come on up. I can hear the question.
Yes, I have a question on marriage. In that single parenthood is at an all-time high, and the consequences of single parenthood is devastating for our communities. And I've seen that a lot of minority communities have the highest rate of single parenthood.
Right.
And many politicians have not discussed this at all. And I see many, especially young people especially around my age, 19 to 25. A lot of them do not have two-parent households. A lot of them are raised by single parents, and there's many issues of nihilism in the young people of today.
Okay, hang on just a minute.
How do you plan to address that?
Well, a lot of these happen because, there you go. A lot of these are because of the government's misguided help in charity. And basically what they do, here's the problem. I don't think I've mentioned this yet. When people ask, as I mentioned in my speech, government's too big, too bossy, too nosy, too intrusive. The other half of why I'm running for office is because the government usually ends up hurting the very people they're trying to help. And that happened with charity. You know, the poverty level was going down until we started the war on poverty, and then it leveled off. And by the way, if people say to you, oh no, it kept going down during the 60s, that's because the laws weren't enacted yet. Most of them weren't enacted until around 1971. And then, of course, it leveled off. So we had government who was basically paying a mother to kick the dad out of the home because she got more money sometimes. We've got backwards laws. And again, this starts with such a good intention. You know, it used to be called AFDC. It was started, I believe, in the 30s. And it's like, oh, we've got widows with young kids. How do we help them? We'll pass this law. And what does it turn into? It turns into an article I read a few decades ago where the reporter asked the 15-year-old girl why she was having sex without protection. Aren't you afraid of getting pregnant? And her answer was, no, I'll just collect AFDC. So now you've got it as a reward for somebody to do something that works against them. Because I can tell you that having a child before you graduate from high school is something that is going to statistically put you at a greater risk for poverty. So government puts something in and then it goes backwards. So charity is much better done at the, even if the government handles it, it's much better done at the state level. I would let the states figure that out. But even better than that is at the private level and letting private charities and churches help people. They're much more compassionate than the federal government could ever hope to be, and they could do such a much better job of not putting out those perverse rewards. And as somebody who studies psychology, I understand how reward and punishment works, and they just messed up the whole system. So thank you so much. I think Jess is coming up.
Yeah. Woo!